So thanks everyone for joining. This is actually the 45th meeting of the Infrastructure Buildings Working Group. This group has been around since actually 2013. It is part of the Anarcan Adaptation platform. And through the platform, we've actually had some access to some new resources to support IBWG that Anna will talk about shortly. If you are new to the group, this is an open forum. Unlike other working groups that are part of the adaptation platform that sort of focus on projects and so on, this is really more about information dissemination. If you have projects that you would like to get in front of this group, if you know of people, you know of projects that you'd like to have an audience for, and if you know of anybody that would like to participate in these meetings, please feel free to share links and connect notably with Anna Murphy, myself, or Chad Nelson. But it's meant to be an open forum, so please share if of interest. Note that we are recording the meeting. We do plan to post a recording of the meeting on we have like sort of a private YouTube site we might make public, and that will go onto the website that Anne is going to talk about shortly, and slide decks and so on. We will also provide wherever possible, including after this meeting. If you would like to talk during the meeting, offer a comment at any time, put your hand up. Usually we hold comments and questions until after speakers have finished. But if you'd like to say something, put your hand up. When you're talking, please turn your camera on and make your statement. And otherwise, if you wouldn't mind keeping at least your mic muted, but you're welcome to keep your camera on if you'd like. Also, while we're moving through the meeting, feel free to use the chat to notify the group of any projects that you have going on, workshops, anything that's coming up, new reports that you'd like to share. This is a good forum to get that information out. So use the chat. We'll collect anything that people enter into the chat and share it with the meeting notes after the meeting. So even though I think we have maybe 60 or 70 people online today, we've got, I think, close to 200 people on our mailing list. All of the adaptation experts that you know in Canada, I think, are in some way connected or involved. So if you have resources you'd like to get out, this is a forum that you can use for that purpose. So please do use the chat through the meeting or send us a note after the meeting. We do have a membership directory that we eventually plan to make public so people can see who is participating in this group, what their background and interests are. If you wouldn't mind, I believe Anna will share the link in the chat, and if you wouldn't mind entering your information, your work area, your interests, we do plan to make this a public resource online. I should also note a couple of things that we wanted to highlight for the group. Envision version 4 is currently looking for feedback. So if you're familiar with the Envision framework, very important framework for understanding vulnerability and sustainability of infrastructure in North America, that is currently going through an update. There's a link in the chat and you can submit comments. There is also a project on building a resilient energy infrastructure that in Europe that we will link to in the chat. And one last note on a new resource from FireSmart Canada, their new development guideline for new construction, developers, and so on for wildfire protection. That was just released last week, and we'll put a link in the chat as well. I'm now going to turn it over to Anna, who is going to briefly review the Can Adapt IBWG dashboard.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, hi, everyone. So as you know, we've been working with CanAdapt to create a platform where our members can easily access meeting materials, share resources and events, and essentially keep materials from getting lost in between meetings. So as a note, CanAdapt is a climate adaptation capacity building hub, and it's led by the Climate Risk Institute and Royal Roads University. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes at the top of this meeting to introduce the draft of the site. It is live with some materials on there for you to take a look at. So we'll also toss the link in the chat and then just share screen to give you a quick look as to what we've been working on. So there you are. All right, perfect. So this is the, oh goodness, main page there. And apologies, just getting my navigations around. There we go, perfect. So the purpose of this site, as I mentioned, is to make IBWG meeting materials more accessible. We want essentially to hold an inventory of them over time, of those slide decks, of the meeting notes, and have an opportunity to share events, webinars, and latest research that's relevant to our work that we commonly share in the chat, as Dan was mentioning in our meetings, that's collected in our meeting notes. So I invite you all to take a look at the site, noting that it is still in early days, and we will be uploading new content regularly, and also, sharing with you a bit more about how we plan to use it going forward. Right now, you'll find some foundational content already up. So we have, this is our homepage here, and it has some of those posts that we've been working on. We will be updating this post here with our meeting notes. But just at the top, we have a bit about who we are. This is coming from our terms of reference. As well, we have our 2 state of play reports that the IBWG created from 2017 and our update from 2023. And we have some posts. So these are some webinars and some reports that have come across our desks recently that are related to our work and are usually pieces that we share at the top of the meeting, as Dan just did. So this is a big chunk of it as well. It's a compilation of our previous meeting materials. So right now we just have the last few meetings, but you'll be able to click here on the post and see our agenda, our meeting notes, as well as our meeting recording there. They are, Dan, and then our presentation slide deck. So again, everything that is really kind of captured in our one email that goes out after the meeting is just meant to be kind of hosted here. And feel free to sign up to become a member. You can just press this join button here. You just put in your name and your email, and then you sign up. It's supposed to be, it is very easy. But if you have any issues, I want to kind of introduce our IT extraordinaire from the Climate Risk Institute, Jane Zhang. Jane, if you want to come on and just give us a bit of a wave. If you have any questions regarding your access to becoming a member, it's not really a big concern right now. All of the materials on the site are public, but it might play a bit more of a role as we move forward, particularly as we are looking to make that directory public. So if you have any issues, you can connect with Jane. She can put her contact info in the chat. And then lastly, just to note, we will be using the traditional method for this week for sharing material. So there will be an update email that you will be receiving as we usually have been. And then we'll also be updating this site just for ease. But yeah, I hope you enjoy. Let us know any initial thoughts and if you have any issues. But I'll hand it over to Chad then to introduce today's speakers.
Thank you, Anna. That's great. And what a pleasure to be here at our 45th IBWG meeting, as Dan said. So to introduce you to today's featured presentations, I'm very pleased to say we'll be hearing from Maren Illman and Anna Lafayette from the Electric Power Research Institute. This will be followed by our very own co-chair, Dan Sandink, will speak to the work between the Institute of Catastrophic Loss Reduction with the Canadian Home Builders Association. And then we'll have some other updates as well from our members, from Katie Pearson, as well as special presentations from Ulrich Ornelt, and conclude the meeting with a short presentation from George Karagianis from the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure. So to introduce in 1:15 to 1:35, our first presentation, Prioritizing Climate Adaptation Investments Across the Ontario Electric Sector. This will be presented by Maren, who's a senior engineer in EPRI's Resource Adequacy Group. Her research focuses on flexibility in resource adequacy and climate resilient integrated planning. Prior to joining EPRI, she completed her PhD at the KU Leuven University in Belgium in the Group of Energy Systems Integration and Modeling, focused on developing a highly flexible and multi-energy system modeling tool. Anna, who I'll be co-presenting with her, is a program lead at EPRI, leading the bulk system integration of renewables and distributed energy resources group. Before joining EPRI, she was the supervisor of reliability assurance at Ontario's IESO, where she developed its capacity market and set specifications for long-term contracts. She also held leadership roles at the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, including a term as chair of NERC's Reliability Assessment Subcommittee. So welcome. We'll have a presentation here for 20 minutes and then a 10-minute question period. Over to you, Maren and Anna.
Okay, thank you very much. This is, I think, yep, the screen's perfect. So we're going to tag team between Maren and I. That was a really nice introduction. So I guess we can jump right in and maybe go on to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing, why we're doing it. I also recognize, and we put this all the time, EPRI is not necessarily well known in Canada, and we are very much an electricity company or energy focused, so not everybody would know us. But we've actually existed for the last 50 years, and it was after a 1965 blackout. So an act of Congress in the US said, hey, electricity companies, you need to work together and do some research, and we were formed. The name kind of says it all, Electric Power Research Institute. It's exactly as it sounds. But what's unique about us is a few things. First of all, our focus is on applied research. So we are funded and we care deeply about making sure that the research is applied by electric utilities and energy companies around the world. Because you want to have, we aim to be credible and have objective information. We are not just US based. Like I said, we were formed out of the US, but we're actually a global institute. Both Maren and myself are based in Canada. I'm part of EPRI Canada. And because we've been in existence for 50 years, we're really relied upon across the electricity sector for a whole number of things. And so if you ever have a question about electricity, whether it's nuclear generation, transmission lines, you want to do testing, like there's some expert in our company that does it. And that makes a really unique thing, because when you're trying to look at infrastructure and resilience, you really do need to bring all those pieces of the puzzle together. And that's a big part of what we were thinking about as we did this project and as we're doing next one. Next slide. Okay. So for those of you who don't know what's kind of been going on with the electricity space, in part because of decarbonization efforts, but also because of just more demand in general, there's an increased reliance on the power system. When we started to look more seriously at climate resilience at our institute, on the picture on the left, we had this kind of, we saw this increased growth. This is, around the world of what the dependence would be. So this chart is from the US, but honestly, we saw it everywhere. Okay, if we were to talk today, it's kind of gone exponential because of data center growth, and that is true in Canada as well. And that's also been an incredible piece of information that we've received from our utility partners on this project as we've been doing it. The catch is, with all of this, is the electricity system has always been weather dependent. Now with climate change, it's becoming even more dependent. You're relying on electricity more, and the generators that are attached, the transmission lines, everything is being operated to a point that they are more and more dependent on the weather and climate. So let's go to the next slide. That's kind of just our motivation, and get into it a little bit more in detail. If you think about a transmission system or the electric system, I call it like a very messy Rube Goldberg machine. And in fact, in the Eastern Interconnection, which is the power system that connects all the way from Ontario down to Florida, it is known as the largest machine in the world. That means there's a number of places where things could fall apart. This also means that there's a lot of redundancy. It makes a lot of reliability. What's kind of wild is every aspect has a weather impact. So if I start on the left here, energy demand, how much the demand will be, it is incredibly dependent on temperature. Yesterday, Ontario hit its peak, what might be its peak for the summer. And if you are based in Ontario or somewhere in the eastern part of Canada, you know it has been really hot, right? Hot and muggy demand really increases electricity. It increases the amount of fuel that we need. Now, that would be easy enough if everything else operated as efficiently as normal under hot weather. And I'm just going to stick to hot weather, but this is true about every aspect. If you look at our transmission lines, they don't operate as efficiently in hot weather. And again, we saw that just this week. So Hydro One actually had a station failure in downtown Toronto. I would suspect probably heat related. And that caused, I believe it was about 26,000 people out of power during the hottest day of the year. But it also just decreases the capacity of it. There are other types of climate hazards that also affect the grid. If you are in Manitoba, or actually, honestly, anywhere in Canada, you have experienced some form of ice storm and so forth. Other things that have damaged it. Similarly, generators all face similar challenges. Wind power, if it's super windy, if you have a hurricane, doesn't operate as efficiently or at all. Droughts can impact hydro generation. So all to say, all this kind of impacts all together, and they all have to be seen together. Well, you'll also see here a couple of examples of which companies, and we just picked on Ontario because this is our case study, that are primarily responsible for each of them. And this is something not a lot of people know, but at least in Alberta and Ontario, but even in other provinces, there are many, many companies responsible for different parts of the electricity grid. So they all have to work together. So that Rube Goldberg machine is not just a technical issue, it is also a people and organizational issue. And you can see that on this slide. All right, next slide. If you don't already know this, I think I'm speaking to the choir here, but the cost of extreme events is increasing dramatically, right? And so this has also become a real big motivation. And so 3 years ago, a number of electric companies across the globe came to EPRI and they said, we need to do something about this. And you can see this not like in the diagram below. Here are a number of examples of storms and events that have caused really, really large damage, large costs in terms of insurance costs in Canada. And this is true across the world. And in addition to the damage, like the physical insurance costs, is also the cost of people, the fact that people are without power, that they need to manage all that, their loss of work, and so forth. And so electricity companies were saying, well, we need to do something about this. How do we prepare? How do we plan for it? And so what we did, next slide, was this climate resilience and adaptation initiative. We actually just launched the results of our initiative. Oh yeah, that's perfect. And we will share these slides with you because all of these are clicked on so you can go and see every resource that we published. But the intention of this exercise was really to demonstrate that there are ways to include climate resilience into power system planning, to come up with a method that was consistent and collaborative across the globe. Electricity companies are very risk adverse. They're also rate regulated. So that means that they need to really justify their spending, especially capital spending and investments. So they needed to know that what they're doing can be justified, and they can do the right prioritization to get those costs recovered. And so all of this is developing methods to do this. The caveat being that we wanted to, in this initial effort, it was very generic. We used, and Marin's going to talk a little bit about how we did it, and we'll talk then why we wanted to go further in Canada and what we'll do. So I'll hand it over to you, Marin. I think this
awesome.
is yeah.
Thanks, Anna. Let me take over here. Perfect. Yeah. So how to make climate-informed decisions and improve resilience. That is either near-term or long-term investment decisions. Are we interested in upgrading maybe an individual asset or the system as a whole? And then we need to assess whether adaptations are justified. So the ready approach, generally speaking, is scoping the problem. What are the system needs and the timeframes of interest? Selecting the relevant climate data, conducting integrated model runs, and then evaluating cost effectiveness of adaptation strategies. So I think in the next 10 minutes or so, I'll do a little bit of a deep dive into a case study that we did on a synthetic Texas case study, show some of the results, show the mechanics of the approach, and then also dive a little bit into what is changing as we're moving towards our real world Ontario case study. So in the context of this call, I thought it would make sense to give a bit of an idea of the inner workings of the climate adapted planning process. And to understand what that actually means, we maybe have to first take a step back and look at how is this, let's say, normally done, how has this historically been done. So that overview here of this framework is just to give you an idea that there is multiple models and planning processes involved in this framework. However, historically, these planning functions are not necessarily integrated. So that means that they are often looked at in silos, and there's, if at all, there's only unilateral integration across models. So for example, in the very front center here, we have something that's called a capacity expansion model. That is a model that identifies cost optimal investments in resources, and then results from this model are assessed in a reliability model to check whether the build out is actually resource adequate. But linkages between those models have been typically not much overlapping. So the people that are involved in operating these models and the model itself are in silos. So how do we make things better? And a step in that direction is to integrate the planning approach, right? So in this graph, it's just highlighted by having more of these arrows between the different models. But spoiler, this is especially important as we're moving to incorporating climate-informed or climate-resilient planning, as we need to consistently carry climate hazards across the different models. So if we link the various planning stages and iterate between them, for example, having, like in this example, we have an operational model, and we are linking it back to this investment model if we're finding that operationally we are identifying specific hazards, then we overall come up with a better build out, or a more resilient and a more holistic build out overall. So this process isn't always easy, and will yet again add another layer to complexity, as we are today obviously talking about climate informed capacity investment planning. So this is the full climate resilience assessment framework. Again, we don't need to understand each and every single box, but what I hope you notice is that at the top, we now have two additional inputs that are coming into play. Those are the climate data inputs and the asset vulnerabilities to climate variables. And now we have this integrated planning process where we link the different planning functions, and at the same time, we're carrying all the different climate variables consistently across those different planning functions. Now, when we're talking about climate resilience, we're often interested in extreme events. That, however, those extreme events are by definition rare. And at the same time, if we're looking at climate projections and climate scenarios and different models, we have a very rich set of data. So it can be tricky to identify what such extreme events look like and how we pick them out from the large data set. So in that spirit, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about how we are identifying extreme events for our climate-informed planning, and then also give a bit of a flavor how these extreme events make it into the capacity expansion process and the subsequent reliability models. All right, so how do we identify extreme events? For that, EPRI has developed a tool that's called the so-called risk screening tool. And as a first step, what we do is we take a potential capacity build-out, so assets and where they're located, and map them to the corresponding closest weather stations to capture spatial diversity of the climate variables. In a subsequent step, we then apply asset vulnerabilities to weather data. So how do we do that? We have something that we call an asset vulnerability matrix that describes how certain weather variables translate to derating of capacities. So just to make that very tangible, we have here an example of a wind power plant, and if the speed is below a certain threshold, so in this example, lower than 4 meters per second, we assume that there's no wind, and in the example of a wind power plant, 100% derate of the wind power plant. So now these asset derating rules, we then apply across the entire set of climate data that we have to get an estimate of how much of our supply is going to be unavailable as a function of these climate variables across the entire data set. Now we have the entire data set mapped to unavailable supply. How do we pick out extreme events across these? So in that last step, we kind of take a window and we scroll, let's say, through the entire data set to identify which of those periods actually was exposed to the highest amount of unavailable supply. So we could stop the process here. That would allow us to pick out extreme events. Now, if we have multiple climate models and climate projections, sometimes they may be picking up events that are similar. So if we want to reduce the solution space of extreme events more, what we can do is we can, let's say, cluster extreme events to pick out, for example, a specific heat event or specific cold snap and so forth. All right, so now we've got the extreme events. What do we do with them? And that's leading me to our climate-informed bulk system capacity expansion tool. I think I mentioned it earlier on the side. It's essentially the tool that comes up with cost-optimal investments in where assets should be located and which size they should have. And in our business as usual approach, those models are pretty large, and we only use a handful of representative operating modes. So essentially, something like expected representative operating conditions. Now, when we make the transition to our climate-informed, climate-resilient capacity planning, we still optimize investments, but we now do so while respecting that there is extreme events, and those are provided by the risk screening tool. And to ensure that we're incorporating those climate functions, again, consistently across models, we're incorporating derates as a function of weather variables. And we're also looking at potential hardening options. So, for example, we could think of inlet chillers or winterization of assets, depending on which extreme events are at hand. The resilience, again, is a key constraint to consider. And what we chose here is what we call a loss load tolerance. Essentially, it's constraining the amount of energy that can go unserved during an extreme event. And that loss load tolerance metric, we can explore how tightening that constraint impacts our build out. And that is exactly what I wanted to show here to the right. We have this loss load tolerance, again, shedding of load during extreme events. And if we tighten this loss load tolerance to 0%, we're seeing that the system is investing more and more in in hardening of investments to ensure resilience with regards to extreme events. So that is good to know, but a classic approach would be to look at a reliability model as a resource adequacy model to see whether the system is actually reliable in operation. So again, we have a resource adequacy assessment and a business as usual approach. We would simply take a handful of weather years, run a bunch of Monte Carlo simulations. But now as we're moving towards climate informed planning, we are taking, in this case, 71 climate projected weather years, and we're bringing in climate data through weather-dependent D rates, through variable renewable energy sources profiles, and weather-dependent probabilities. A standard planning criterion that is typically used in resource adequacy assessments is called a 1 in 10 reliability criterion. Essentially, it's saying that in 10 years worth of simulation data, we should only observe 1 day with unserved energy. And to the top right, that metric, it's called an LOE, a loss of load expectation, is illustrated here. And what I just wanted to highlight is, as we're moving from capacity buildouts with a higher target for resilience, that also has an effect on reliability. So reliability increases as we move towards higher resiliency buildouts. And actually only the most resilient buildout fell within, let's say, one of these standard planning criteria. So that was a really nice finding that we had when we were doing this case study. So yeah, to wrap things up on the Texas case study, I just wanted to share a few learnings, but also limitations of this particular case study. So for me, the value was really that we could show that it's actually working, and we could leverage, we could show the benefits on the system as a whole as we move to climate-informed planning, and also to account for resilience, that it also has an impact on reliability of the system. And so what's next is also equivalent to what the limitations of this case study are. We have applied this system, this framework, to a single test system that is synthetic in nature. But as Anna alluded to, things get much more complicated when we're trying to apply this framework across multiple companies with different ownerships, different objectives, but with shared responsibilities. And also, possibly the most important one, we essentially had a synthetic data set in the beginning. But moving towards a real-world case study, there's also real-world problems around data sharing, finding consensus on agreement on assumptions. And then lastly, we looked at one specific region, but climate hazards may not always be the same across regions. So particularly for Ontario, what we want to look at are additional hazards such as ice and wildfires. So moving quickly here, so case study, Climate Ready meets Ontario. So what to expect from this case study? Again, we're in the early stages of gathering data, bringing climate data together with system data. So, but just kind of to showcase where is this journey going. And for that, I wanted to show on the one hand the hazards that we're considering. As I mentioned earlier, there is some that were not part of the Texas case study. So we're now also going to be looking at ice and wildfires and droughts. And actually, it was quite nice as we worked with the funders to develop a consensus on which hazards to look at. And everyone seemed to be impacted, but also interested in similar hazards. So where do we go from here? What will it take to make a climate-ready Ontario? We are going to represent future climate conditions inside our planning processes. We've been working with the Climate Risk Institute to gather all that climate data that we need. We will run that suite of integrated models that I presented, and then also do a cost-benefit analysis to compare what is a resilient investment, what are the benefits of that compared to, let's say, a no-action baseline case. And then lastly, coordination within and across organizations. Figuring out data sharing and limitations. And while I mentioned earlier, consensus on assumptions might actually be sort of easy to accomplish, or it has been very fruitful so far. Data sharing is a bit challenging, especially when we're talking about sensitive data, who is able to provide what. So that's really an early learning for us also, that even as an independent research institute, it's not always easy to bring together everyone's institutional data. Yeah, so I think that wraps it up for me. Really curious to see what learnings this case study will bring. We're excited about the collaborative nature of this project. And we really look also forward to hearing your thoughts and inputs on this particular topic. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Maren and Anna, for an in-depth and insightful presentation. We have about 8 minutes or so for questions and answers at this juncture in the meeting. Probably can remove the deck at this point, but people may ask us to go back to it. And at this juncture, I'll watch the chat, but also watching for hands here. My view doesn't let me see all the hands at once, so I have to admit I'm kind of scrolling across here, folks. I know that I find that this discussion extremely timely in an age when we are talking about nation building projects and the importance of what we're embarking upon, as some would say, at a speed and a scale that it's not been pursued for a while. And I found that your comments about the largest machine in the country and the weather dependency and the evaluating the cost effectiveness really really intriguing and valuable. So I also know, as I give one more moment for comments to emerge, and I'll be watching the chat, I believe the Canadian Electrical Code will be, the newest version will be coming out very shortly. And my understanding is that future climate design parameters or values will be reflected and referenced in it as well. So I think as we ever look more forward as a country to building resilience into our operations. Are there questions that I'm missing? And Anna, I see one hand up. Joanna, maybe that's, hey, Chad. Oh, that's a comment about the site. Other questions about this presentation, though? Maybe it's a new realm for people, because we've often looked very much at flooding, at wildfire, and it's so important to see these things from different angles and analyses.
I have a question. Well, people are still thinking of their questions. Thanks for this really interesting work. I guess a specific question about Northern Ontario and wildfire. We've heard of cases elsewhere in North America where electrical distribution systems had a role in initiation of wildfire. I'm wondering how much of a concern there is in Ontario about that topic specifically, and if that's factored into your work.
So for this work, we specifically have scoped out the risk of electrical transmission causing wildfire. It is a significant risk in an area of like other research that we're doing at EPRI that I would love to roll in. There's a lot of things that can be done about that. Vegetation management. There is having better alert systems. There's some AI technologies that use like video cameras, and they can spot where this might happen. They also are tracking the lines. So there's a lot that can be done, just unfortunately not part of this project. And yeah, just that's all I'll say for that. But we could get into it at another time if you wanted.
Right. Good, thanks.
Any other comments here?
I see Marianne.
Great.
Hi. Thank you so much for the presentation. Very, very interesting and great work. I look forward to learning a little bit more about EPRI. My question is about how this ultimately can help inform policy or regulation, because I know Chad mentioned like the electrical code, and there's a committee there that is, I think, linked somewhat to EPRI, but that is on adaptation that they established a year or two ago, and they're looking at what priorities they're moving forward. So ultimately, I see this as more on the risk assessment and planning piece, but is there a way for that to ultimately inform something like the electrical code or other policy?
Yes. So when we talk about the electrical code, and a part of the work that we had been doing, not as this case study, but in like more like broad work, we've been working on developing, what codes and standards could or should change, and what that means. CSA group was part of a lot of our work, so they were a big motivator for it, and we work really closely with them so that they're able to say what should we prioritize in terms of standards and how do we look at adaptation. So it's actually been really, really fruitful with them. The other aspect is like, what can other companies do? What can policymakers do with this information? And this is really important. I'll ask Marion to think, give her 2 cents as well. But I've seen it in this work, this potential, first of all, in trying to find agreement. What pathway should I use? What's the standard that I want to hold myself to? How much risk am I willing to take? Many companies are looking to regulators to kind of set the bounds for them. Regulators, in turn, they want to have some data so that they are informed. So having that shared knowledge and approach and then saying, okay, yeah, now we agree and this is what we're going to do, I think can be a real consensus builder. And we've been really blessed because we have a great relationship with Camput as well. And Camput has, been following along with our progress and thinking about that. So I think that's really great. Policymakers, and I think I've recently saw this come out of Ontario policy, trying to say, there is a role for capacity building. Resilience should matter when you do your planning. So there's also a policy driver that can help and accelerate the work. I think these are necessary. If a company tries to do this alone, first of all, because the systems are so integrated, it is kind of futile for one company to do it alone and not have their neighbors do that. I think that's true of all resilience type of matters. The second part is just, nobody wants to gold plate the system, and nobody wants to make a power system that is too expensive and people can't pay their bills, right? So it has to be well informed, and that consensus is really important. So I think I can see this going that way of just driving conversation, making sure that the priorities are aligned, and then helping to motivate the next steps.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. We're just about to turn to our next section for me, but I see we have 1 minute left. I see one question in the chat here. I believe this is Eric Sparling of CRI. Do you wish to ask your question, or I'll proceed to read it?
Sure, that's fine, Chad. Yeah, I was just wondering, it's along the same lines, but I was thinking about explicitly focusing some work using the modeling framework to evaluate the differences in terms of foregone losses or costs that the forthcoming improvements to the electricity code that Chad mentioned might make.
Yeah, and I think you're hitting it there, as in cost benefit analysis is really also like one of the key pieces that we brought into the framework, as in to understand what are the additional costs of not planning for resilience or vice versa. Well, I don't think we will really be putting a number on it, but at least qualitatively we have analyzed what are the drawbacks and the benefits. And we also have an entire deliverable on how to do that cost benefit analysis in a climate informed context. So happy to share the report maybe in the chat as well afterwards.
Okay, that's great. And in the interest of moving through our agenda today, I'll just note in the chat there's one more question, but maybe Anna or Marion, you can look at that one about indicators as we proceed to our next presentation, in which I have the pleasure for the first time of introducing my co-chair, Dan Sandink, who's the Director of Research for the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. So I would just like to say Dan's been a pillar of work in this regard on resilience and infrastructure in Canada for some time, with ICLR for 17 years. And I remember what a key role you had in the creation of the National Adaptation Strategy and our experts working group across the country on the infrastructure pillar. So I'm really pleased to introduce Dan to speak about work that ICLR has led in concert with the Canadian Home Builders Association. So over to you, Dan.
Great. Thanks, Chad. And it's nice to have this platform, even though we set this up, I usually don't present in front of it. So thanks everyone for sticking around. So as Chad mentioned, we've been working with the Canadian Home Builders Association. I noticed that Frank Lohman is online as well. So he's one of our important collaborators at CHBA, and would invite him to speak up where he feels relevant. So I'm going to talk about a specific component of the work that we've been doing with home builders, the insurance industry, and Canadian Home Builders Association over the past about year and a half. And that is what we're calling tiered resilience options, or we're calling it good, better, best resilience options. I'll talk about what that is and how we arrived at those options. So really quickly, a little bit on our organization. I don't often do an introduction to our organization, but we are an institute of Western University under the umbrella of the engineering department there. We have staff at Western University, but also several more practical staff based in the Greater Toronto area that I categorize myself as more practical staff, working for ICLR, whose job it is to implement research findings, academic findings in the field. We've been around since 1997. Historically, most of our work was academic, a lot of lab testing studies, that sort of thing. A good portion of this work was focused on understanding the performance of low-rise residential buildings in Canada, wood frame construction. I'll interchangeably use the term Part 9 buildings throughout the presentation. So those are buildings that are 3 stories or less, residential occupancy, 600 square meters or less, sort of the majority of residential buildings that we have in Canada. We tend to concentrate our work on a few key areas: high wind, convective storms, including hail, localized wind events, extreme short duration rainfall in urban areas, as well as wildfire and seismic risks. The reason why we focus on those topics, ICLR is actually an insurance industry associated organization. About half of our funding comes from the insurance industry. The other half comes from various projects, typically that we do for government agencies. And that's what we find driving the majority of insured loss in Canada during catastrophe events. So across the top of my screen, some of the historical work that we've been involved in, or current ongoing work as well, on understanding vulnerability of residential construction for high wind. On the far left is some of the work from the wind engineering group at Western. We've also been doing work on urban flood protection for buildings with University of Guelph, and post-fire community inspections and so on. And since the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, we've also been involved in translating a lot of this information into standards and guides. There's been several new national standards of Canada, new guidelines produced over the past few years with federal funding. Some examples on the bottom left. We were also involved in vulnerability assessment projects. You might have seen me before associated with the privacy program. And more recently, we've been asked by our board of directors to focus on implementation of research findings, as opposed to just conducting research and developing standards, finding ways to actually implement resilience options in the field. And this is where this work comes into play. So why tiered resilience options? So why are we looking at different levels of resilience options? So the major reason is that we've seen limited uptake of resilience in the residential construction sector in Canada. So there are several new guidelines, as I mentioned before, covering various drivers of disaster risk: wildland fire, urban flooding, high wind, hail. So we have good guidance documents on these topics, like the NRC Wildfire Guide, new standards on basement flood protection Z800, the new BNQ standards on I&I management. For high wind, we released recently a high wind design guideline for Part 9 construction, CSA SY20. And then there's been methods out in the field for quite a while for hail protection. But uptake has been extremely low. And so we wanted to find ways of increasing capacity in both the insurance and building sectors so that we can see more uptake, especially as the current status of this guidance is voluntary. It's largely not incorporated into codes, with a few exceptions, but it's not required by regulation. It's largely voluntary. And in the context of voluntary adoption, we need to find strategies to encourage implementation. So we approached CHBA just about 2 years ago and suggested that we find a way to work together, representing the insurance industry, working directly with the building industry to build capacity for both of these industries to implement resilience options in new and in existing homes, and for insurance incentives, and so on. So we formed what we're calling a task force. It's co-chaired by a building industry executive, Alex Miller, and an insurance industry executive, Susan Pinwarden from Aviva. And they've helped us develop a sort of a roadmap for increasing capacity and broad scale implementation of resilience options across Canada. There's multiple components of that roadmap. I'm going to talk about a few of them today, but there's much more work going on, and that roadmap is on the far right. So one of the first things that the building industry participants suggested is that we need to focus on resilience options that we can apply in the field today that are more accessible, that are constructible, before we can get to full implementation of guidelines like the NRC guide, which is a very on wildfire, which is a very comprehensive guideline on wildfire. So working with CHBA and working with a group of builders, we define these tiers. We're calling it good, better, best. You call it, bronze, silver, gold, or basic, enhanced, and full resilience, whatever you like to call it. But we've settled on the terms good, better, best. The basic tier is a tier that's meant to address recurring vulnerabilities as reflected in, for example, insured loss data, municipal surveys, and so on. What are the key drivers of disaster risk associated with Part 9 construction? These options are independent of municipal side intervention. So this is particularly relevant for flood and for wildfire, which you can manage both on the private property side of the property line and on the public side. So for urban flood, for example, you can manage stormwater capacities and increase capacity of stormwater systems, but there's also like a lot you can do on the private side of the property line, and that's what these guidelines focus on. There are options that are meant to be low risk to builders. They should be technically mature. In many cases, they're already in codes, but they're not consistently applied, or they're routinely applied in some jurisdictions, but not in others. And in many cases, they may already be incentivized by insurers. They're likely applicable anywhere in Canada, and they're comparatively low cost, or in many cases, cost neutral. We would build on that tier with a tier we call better, which in many cases enhances the performance of the options that are outlined in the good tier. In some cases, the options are a bit more experimental, a bit more expensive. And then our best tier essentially is application of the full guidelines that I mentioned before, the full wildfire guideline from NRC, the full package from that's in CSA S520 for high wind protection. That's considered to be our best tier. So how are we arriving at these tiered lists? So there's, I would say, 6 important sources of information for our tiered options for construction. There are the existing guidelines, standards, and benefit cost assessments. We're working on a series of we have a group called, we call the pilot working group, that are more technical people from builders and insurance companies. We have some detailed building and insurance industry resilience option surveys that we continue to conduct. We do have a series of builder field trials underway. We're looking also at insurance incentives and market research, understanding what the market is willing to sort of pay for, considering the fact that most of these options are voluntary to date. So here's an example of just the broader set of guidelines and benefit cost assessments that are available that we've been drawing on. The foundational documents, I would say, include the NRC Wildfire Guide. For basement flood, it's the CSA Z800 basement flood guideline. For high wind, it's CSA S520, which is a high wind guideline for Part 9 construction. And then there's a comprehensive set of resources on hail. Hail's a little bit less defined than these other work areas, but the foundational documents are really coming from UL and IBHS in the US. So first, I wanted to highlight the role of what we call our pilot working group. This is a group of builders and insurers that have been informing development of these guidelines with a strong focus on practicality and constructability. So we've been working with this group, running through various iterations of what we're calling sort of our resilience checklists. We have a variety of building companies involved, some larger companies, Mattamy, Minto, for example, and some smaller or medium-sized progressive companies, a lot of net zero builders, builders that are interested in trying out new practices, Avalon, RDC, Doug Terry Homes, and so on. We also have a set of core partners that are focusing on specific areas of work like wildfire. That includes RDH, Fire Smart Canada, for high wind, the Canadian Wood Council, Doug Terry Limited, the Northern Tornadoes Project, for example. For hail, we've been drawing a lot on the findings of the Northern Hail Project, and then also working directly with insurance, large loss claims teams, and so on. We also have some general partners like the NRCan LEAP team, NRC and Standards Council that are sponsoring some of this work as well. So first, one source of information is what we're calling our options surveys. These are comprehensive surveys. We've taken each of the resilience options that are presented in those standards and broken them out, provided very sort of simple presentation of these options, and we're asking builders and insurance companies, so practical, builders, people actually design and build homes, people who write insurance policies, and we're asking them a series of questions about practicality and impact on risk. And we're using this information to prioritize options. So options that are practical, that are available for implementation within the next 5 years and make a difference with respect to risk reduction are prioritized in our tiered options. We're doing that. One source of information is surveys. And so one specific question we're asking builders is, how likely would you implement this option in the next 5 years? And then we ask insurers about the same option, how much impact will it have on risk? We combine that information, and then we can prioritize our options, one source of prioritization. Next is field trials. So I mentioned before, we're conducting a series of field trials. We've got 3 underway right now with builders in British Columbia, Alberta, and Southern Ontario. We've got a builder right now, Alex Miller, who is working on integrating fire resilience into a site in Fernie. We're working with a builder in Calgary looking to incorporate hail and high wind resilience into a series of MERB buildings in southern Calgary. And then we're working with a large production builder in Ontario looking at integrating wind, basin flood, and also hail resilience. So these field trials have really helped us understand very specific practical implications of applying resilience options that builders are not familiar with. And this is feeding back into our guidance documents. And I think this is one of the most important sources of information for these guidance materials. Next source of information is insurance incentives. And this is actually something you might want to look into for your own home policies if you have one. So how do insurers actually incent resilience options? That's always the big question that we get from the building industry. We will apply these options if our buyers will see an insurance incentive. We're trying to communicate the available incentives to the building industry. It's a little bit tricky because it's not always a premium reduction. It's usually a mix of several mechanisms of incentives. There's premiums, deductibles, caps and sublimits for isolated hazards like flood, potentially hail in the future, availability, depreciation schedules, and insurer subsidies. These are all different types of incentives that are not sort of uniformly available across hazard types. So it's been a challenge working with the insurance industry to communicate this information to builders so that they can market voluntary options to potential buyers. And finally, an important source of information is the market research. So another request that we've had from the building industry is to understand what the market is willing to pay for new home construction, for renovation. And so we've got 2 studies completed now. This is one of them, a more quantitative survey of homeowners and home buyers in disaster-prone regions, South Central BC, Calgary area, Southern Ontario, and the Halifax region, looking at wildfire, high wind, urban flood, and hail. And we asked them, would you be willing to invest in resilience in your home for a renovation or for a new home purchase? And we're finding that if presented with options, if presented in the way, if presented specifically with targeted wording, we do find that there is a fairly significant willingness of buyers and owners to participate in helping to pay for resilience options. And we're finding that the halfway point is about $5,000. So of those who are willing to pay, $5,000 is the midpoint, half willing to pay more than $5,000, in some cases up to $25,000 for new home construction and for renovation as well. And it differs by hazard and by region, but it is an indication that there is a market for these options. So next, really quick overview of the tiers in our options by hazard. So starting with hail, for our basic category, we're looking at class 4 impact resistant roof cover, things like no acrylic skylights, some basic testing standards for PV panels. These are all options that the insurance industry is finding reduces claim frequency, and also that the building industry is reporting to us that they can do this in the next few years. As we move up our tiers, we go from sort of market-wide impact-resistant roof cover to a more strenuous test for roof cover, the IBHS hail test. So not just using any class 4 roof cover, using class 4 roof cover that's been rated by IBHS in the US, using stronger skylights, tempered glass, looking at stronger material for eaves troughs and downspouts. And then at the high end, the top tier, where we're less concerned about cost and more concerned about performance of that building. If you want to market a building that's fully resilient, or to the extent possible to hail, you're looking at moving away from asphalt shingles, using higher end roof products, using different siding, avoiding vinyl siding for sure, using LP siding and so on. These are all options that we're sort of tiering out as we move up the tiers, more effective, but potentially more expensive and more complex to apply. We have similar tiers for high wind, moving from roof cover, and as we move up the tiers, full structural resistance to high wind loads that we specified in S520. And then, as I mentioned before, the top tier, full compliance with the standards that are currently available for high wind protection, S520. Similar for basement flood. Basic practices include things like backup power for sump pumps, sewer backflow protection, and then as we move up the tiers, full application of CSA Z800. And then for wildfire, this is actually one of the more complicated topics that we have been working on. We've been working closely with RDH Building Science. The basic tier includes basic elements to reduce the risk of fires igniting near the building and traveling up into the attic. And as we move up the tiers, we're getting to something more like the Fire Smart Development Guide that was mentioned by Anna earlier on. Our top tier is very close to the Fire Smart Development Guide, but we're hearing from the building industry that full application of that guideline is very difficult right now. So we have to start with some more basic more basic steps. So next steps for this project, number one is communication to the public to market these options. One example specifically for wildfire, because it is difficult to communicate and there are sort of aesthetic implications of wildfire. This is something that needs to be communicated to buyers. We need to get away from the perception that it's all concrete. We for example, did these renderings with an architecture firm. This is a fully Fire Smart compliant build. It's not all concrete, as I mentioned before, but there's lots of elements here that reduce risk, non-combustible siding, non-combustible roof cover, and so on. So the building still looks good, but it's fully fire compliant. This is the kind of messaging that we need to help market these options to buyers. And then finally, one of the main outputs before the end of this year are our guidelines, which we are sort of in the process of finalizing. I've got some guidance or some guidelines that we received from our builder partners as they sort of work to educate their trades, their suppliers about these topics. These are the criteria that they outline for us. It's got to be simple. It's got to rely heavily on graphics and pictures, avoid technical language, and so on. So we're using their guidance to develop these guidelines so they have something ready to apply in the field as soon as they can. So I'll end it there. We've got lots of work going on this year. We'll finish out our field trial projects. I should note also that there are new standards coming, there are new standard projects that are being initiated now. For example, the basement flood standard I mentioned is being updated. We are going to work to integrate some of the findings from this work into this standard that we're involved in. Also, the NRC has issued a new standard for wildfire protection, or is issuing a new standard for wildfire protection, and will be involved in incorporating some of these findings as well. And then we also work to expand this work beyond just the building and insurance industries in the coming years. But this is providing a very good baseline for future work. So I'm a bit over time, so I'll end it there and pass it back to Chad.
Thanks very much, Dan. And I think we've had two really power-packed presentations here today. And so this is your chance to ask questions, share comments, either out loud or through the chat. But we welcome the opportunity here to exchange for a few more moments. At 2:10 to 12, we'll transition into the next session, in which we have three more key but a little bit shorter presentations. So are there illustrations? I see one question from Jen in the chat. Are the illustrations or renderings publicly available or in a format, Dan, that can be shared?
Yeah, so we will publish these guidelines. So it's not just going to builders or to CHBA. This will be published via our normal publication route. So definitely will be publicly available.
Okay, any other questions here? And I'm just scrolling through, I'm looking for hands in the chat. Sarah Cunningham is asking, are the research papers you referenced available now?
Yeah, so a lot of the background research work is available. So, I mean, an example are some of the benefit cost assessment studies that we've been involved in. They're all available via our website. Everything you see on the screen here is public information. We haven't gotten to the state in our project to like write a report and publish on our market research work, but we do plan to do that probably next year.
Maybe I'll insert a word here, and just to say that obviously the housing area is what we would genuinely call a crisis. I think that's how a number of political actors have defined it. And with these commitments to seek to build 500,000 homes a year, very rapid and broad interest in constructing more homes and affordable ones. It's so topical that this matter is being tackled. We had our former minister at our department said, if you think it's expensive to build a home, try building it twice. And that was an interesting comment. I'm looking for any other hands up or questions, or people just to come online, and last couple minutes here to take the opportunity for a question. And I see Simon Top. I
see also Harshan and Frank have their hands up.
Oh, great. They're not visible to me. So, but I'll mention Simon's HICC. What is the process for different products and materials to find themselves onto the tier lists? Is it all done through testing? And are you ever approached by vendors to get their products on the better, best tier list?
Yep, that's a good question. So wherever possible, where we do have testing standards, we use that to define materials. So I would say an example is UL 2218 hail impact testing. That's something we rely on. So doesn't matter the manufacturer, doesn't matter the product. If it passes that test, we would accept it into the tiered list. There's similar testing standards for many building materials, roof cover, and so on. We do have some challenge areas, and one specific challenge area is siding and hail impact testing, where we don't have an impact test for the siding industry. So we have been working with some siding companies, LP Smart Side is an example, where they have done third-party testing, and they also warranty their products for impact resistance. And so we're relying on that manufacturer guarantee for now. But we're also identifying areas outside of the sort of the guidelines, areas where we need more better defined testing standards in the future. And one specific example is siding and impact testing. And there's a lot of gaps on wildfire performance as well that I know are being filled by different groups. But while we wait for those testing standards, we are relying in many cases on manufacturer third-party testing to define options.
Thanks, Dan. In the interest of time, we'll speed through these. I think, I hope it's okay, Harshan. I'm going to privilege Frank to go first just because of his connection institutionally with this work. Frank?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Dan, for presenting the work that mostly you're driving, but we're involved in heavily. I just wanted to react a little bit to the housing crisis that you mentioned. You know, you're right. I mean, we don't want to build these homes twice and lose into fires or floods, but currently the challenge on the housing affordability side is building them the first time, which means if they are too expensive, if we add all this cost into regulation, we won't be able to build the 500,000 per year as a housing industry, because people will simply not be able to afford it, and homes that can't be bought will not be built is the reality right now. You see that in BC and Ontario. And so what's so important in this work is that the building industry is being listened to as to where are the easy, the constructible, the simple, the low cost constructible things that we can do to get everyone on board. The good level is really just a stepping stone to get involved. And we hear this from builders doing the field trials saying, you know what, a lot of this stuff we're already doing and we can check this off. That experience is so important because it will inform at the better and best level, as someone of the questioners just mentioned, the supply chain. So I wanted to just highlight the one that Dan just said. What we hear from the builders is, you know what, my suppliers don't understand what I'm talking about. They don't know these standards. So we have to build capacity on the entire industry, entire sector, including the suppliers, supply chain, and getting the manufacturers in. And all of that is happening. And this is really good. So we're really enjoying this, two industries getting together and doing some of this footwork to get some of these emerging technologies into the simple, low cost, low risk area so that we can incorporate them, hopefully cost neutral, but obviously at the best level not possible, but hopefully the good level is cost neutral. Anyway, just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Frank. I think that's really important because supply, affordability, constructability, effectiveness, these are all the watchwords in this domain. Harshan, last question go to you. We've got to run to our next presenters if it's quick.
I've noted it on the chat window.
Oh, wonderful.
So let's just move on to the next
Thank you very
presentation.
much. In the interest of our other presenters, that would be great. So Anna, I'm going to turn over to you then to moderate.
Thanks, Chad. So we're going to head over to a bit of our IBWG roundtable today. We're going to be hearing from Katie Pearson from HICC. So maybe I'll hand over first to you, Katie, and then we'll go over to Utrecht Ernholt from SCC. Thanks.
Hi, Anna, thank you. I will just share my screen quickly here. And here we go. You know, if you can see that. Thumbs up or head nods if you can see my screen.
We can see your screen there. It's not in presenter mode, but that's okay.
That's okay. I like it this way so that I can see you.
Understood.
All right. So thank you, everyone. I'm just here joining you today from the Environment and Climate Change Canada's Canadian Centre for Climate Services. I'm very interested in learning all of the things that you are all up to, but also to provide an update on some of the things that have come to climatedata.ca. For those of you who may not have heard of climatedata.ca, it's a portal website that offers future climate data for Canada. It's offered in collaboration with our regional climate service providers across Canada. So that's Uranos, the Pacific Climate Impacts Consortium, PCIC, the Prairie Centre for Climate Services, Climate Atlantic. We've got ORCA in Ontario, and also the Computer Research Institute of Montreal. So just a little background if you haven't heard of this website before. A couple of exciting updates. In February of 2025, we added a new shared socioeconomic pathway to the website. This is SSP 3-7.0. So what's unique about this new SSP is that it is also considered a high emission scenario, but it falls in between that SSP 8.5, which is the a high emission scenario we've had for about 10 years or more now, and SSP 2-4.5, which is the moderate scenario that's available on the website. So this is the new one, is the orange line with the big orange arrow next to it. That's the new emission scenario that's been added. So you can see that it is lying sort of in between those two, the high emission scenario and the moderate emission scenario. The most notable difference between this and the other emission scenarios is that it has a higher concentration of aerosols. And this can have effects on regional precipitation. So generally speaking, when we have a warmer climate, that means more precipitation. However, in a scenario where there's higher aerosol emissions, what we can see is a suppression of that increased precipitation. That said, in Canada, those aerosols tend to be lower compared to other countries. And so what we're actually seeing is that it may have less of an effect on precipitation in Canada compared to other countries. So this is a new scenario that's been added. Really, it's coming from the desire to have something in between that 5.5 and 4.5. And if you want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the thinking around the research around the aerosols, learning a bit more about the SSPs themselves, either generally or specifically this SSP, I can put the links in the chat. But also if we're sharing the presentation, I've included the links here. The next update that I have is around M6. So this is a new data set that has replaced the HICC. So the long name of this happened in November of 2024. So this is the Canadian Downscale Climate Scenarios Multivariate Dataset, CMIP6 or CanDSC M6, or as we refer to it, just M6, because that's so much easier, replaced the previous HICC data set. So there are a lot of similarities between these two data sets. They use the same global climate ensemble. However, M6 is using a new downscaling method, which preserves the relationship between variables. This is particularly helpful with freeze-thaw cycles and snowfall, where really it's derived from both temperature and precipitation. So it does a better job there. It is also using a different historical observation target. It's called the PHICC blend. And some of the differences with this baseline compared to the past is that it's better for the West Coast, both for temperature and precipitation. So we'll see some changes there, but otherwise they're quite similar in their outputs. Again, if you're interested to learn more about this new data set, we've provided links here to some of our news articles and Learning Zone articles, so you can dive in a bit deeper. And of course, you're always welcome to contact our support desk services. That's the box in the center here. We have our phone number, our email address. And then I've also linked a sign up for our newsletters where you can hear about this type of thing that comes to climatedata.ca. The site is always growing, new data products being added, new learning content being added. And I'll give you a little sneak peek of some of the things that are coming up, at least verbally. I don't have a slide for this, but we do have some new things coming to climatedata.ca, new data sets, new products. So we are working on developing an ASHRAE climate zones tool. We have return periods for variables such as temperature and precipitation extremes coming. We're working on a weather files app. We also have some climate hazard resource finder. We'll be updating the analogs tool. We also are going to be moving into the seasonal indicator forecasts world, and moving and not just having projections, but also having forecasts available on the website. So these are at various stages of development. Some of them will be this year and some of them will be in the years to come. But just to say, if you sign up for the newsletter through climatedata.ca, this can come directly to your inbox, but happy to come back as well and participate and join the membership to provide more details as things become available. Bit of a whirlwind, but there you go. That's all I have to share.
Amazing. Thank you, Katie. If anyone has any questions, just due to time, please toss them in the chat. I will be providing, or we will be providing all of the links in the slide deck with the meeting notes. So all of that will be available to you. And now I will hand it over to Ulrich for your update as well.
Thank you very much, Anna. I will just share my screen. Okay, can you see my slide deck?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So thank you, Anna. I'm Ulrike Ørnold, Senior Policy Analyst at the Standards Council of Canada. My manager, Gillian Cole, was unable to be here today, so I'm happy to step in and briefly provide an update on 2025 publications for our standards to support resilience in infrastructure program, what we call the SHRIP program at SEC. In terms of recent SHRIP publications under the Northern Infrastructure Standardization Initiative, NISI, an update to the CAN B&Q geotechnical site investigations for foundations of building or structure in permafrost zones was published back in February. This national standard of Canada reflects both new climate data as well as new climate change adaptation. In addition to that, we have a technical specification, a climate risks informed approach to asset management in northern regions. This was published back in March. And this technical specification provides guidance on how to integrate climate risks into asset management practices and helps organizations ensure that their built and natural infrastructure assets in northern regions are better prepared to the impacts of extreme weather events. In March, a workshop agreement on nature-based solutions for water management was published. This is a result of a virtual workshop held back in October last year. And this workshop collected insights, including case studies and technical resources, to establish consensus on key aspects for using nature-based solutions for managing water quality and quantity in Canada. In the beginning of May, a guide on applying inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility within climate resilient infrastructure was published. The purpose of the guide is to help asset owners and municipalities with decision-making and risk management relating to their grey infrastructure by providing guidance on how to prioritize construction, operation, and retrofit in the context of climate change adaptation. And this project was delivered by the Diversity Institute. Back in February, a new national standard of Canada on developing and interpreting intensity, duration, frequency, IDF, information under changing climate was published. The purpose of this national standard of Canada is to build on a 2019 technical guide for Canadian water resources practitioners and to set normative language for the best methods to formulate and interpret IDF curves in a climate change setting. And this project was delivered by CSA Group. And then in terms, lastly, just in terms of updates on activities in our transportation stream, SEC attended the TRACS conference back in May. And SEC has also signed the contract with CSA to develop a new national standard of Canada on Canadian methods for the prevention of rail buckling on passenger and transit rail systems. And lastly, the SHRIP and SHRIP staff will most likely present as we have advanced to the second stage of the application process at the Transportation Association of Canada conference in Quebec City this fall. So just passed on to the last slide. So thank you very much for your attention. Please feel free to reach out to my manager, Gillian Cole, at the email address you see here. If you have any questions or if you would like additional information about our deliverables and program. And then with that, I will pass it back to you, Anna. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ulrich, and congratulations on all of the publications and work that's been coming out in the last few months. Thanks for sharing. So Now I will be handing it over to the last presentation of today's meeting. We've had a packed meeting. It's been great. So George Cariani, this is over to you, the Risk and Resilience Director at the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, for a quick presentation on a survey that they are interested in IBWG input. Thanks, George.
Thank you, Anna. Greetings, everybody. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. I'm not going to continue in French. Thank you for this opportunity to brief you about the Global Infrastructure Resilience Survey, the second edition of it. I work at the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, an organization whose mission is to mobilize an engineering-led coalition to make resilience and sustainability a cornerstone of decision-making in the infrastructure lifecycle in communities around the world. With that in mind, we are undertaking this year the Global Infrastructure Resilience Survey, which endeavors to improve our understanding and perspective of infrastructure resilience knowledge by looking into the current status of national capacities of infrastructure systems globally, investigating the governance, institutional, and human capacities around infrastructure resilience, and certainly, last but not least, provide insights on how resilience can be improved around the world, for example, through policies, maintenance, accountability, disaster preparedness, financial capacity, and the likes. There's a strong climate change orientation this year, this time in the survey, and we're also looking particularly into the capacity of national infrastructure systems to absorb, respond to, recover from climate risks. We're not doing it alone. We're working with the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructures, which is a partnership of national governments, United Nations agencies and programs, multilateral development banks and financing mechanisms, private sectors and academia seeking to promote resilience of new and existing infrastructure systems. That survey will feed into CDRI's biennial report on global infrastructure resilience, which will be published for the second time this year. The first one was published in 2019. It's available online on the United Nations website. And it is becoming a fairly vital resource for policymakers, practitioners, and researchers worldwide. This year, the survey looks into the 6 key themes that you see on this screen. The blue-ish boxes represent the key questions that are being included in the survey. So we're looking into governance and institutional and technical capacity, both in the public and private sector. We're looking into finance, risk assessment, the use of new technologies for infrastructure resilience, nature-based infrastructure solutions, and monitoring systems. Interestingly enough, that last pillar there is trying to connect the survey with the Sendai Framework for Action, which is the United Nations policy instrument around disaster risk reduction. We're taking a mixed methods approach, combining a qualitative and quantitative approach. So there is an online questionnaire which is available in 4 languages. We're also doing interviews of key experts in selected countries and focus group discussions in 3 or 4 countries around the world. The primary audience includes essentially anybody who has hands-on experience on infrastructure resilience, whether you're designing it, building it, funding it, managing it, or creating policies for it. We want to hear from you. If you understand the realities of infrastructure in your country, you're essentially part of our primary target audience. We're essentially looking to gather the insights from professionals working on the downstream aspects of infrastructure, including construction, maintenance, operation, repairs, and use. We have targeted the 40 countries you see on this slide as our primary targets. You see Canada there in bold is one of them. We would like to do a little bit better in terms of responses. In Canada, we only have 18 responses so far. We would like to get to 70 to be able to include the country in the final report. So this is essentially a call for action. Please help us get more responses from Canada. Please help us get the word out. As I said, it's an online questionnaire. It includes maybe 30 questions, but they're constructed in such a way, it's made in such a way that it takes about, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes for respondents to reply. I'm going to try to put the link in the chat, and I think I made it. Or is it a picture of the link? I don't.
You've got both, but we also have
Okay, it's both. Good news. Okay. In addition to that, the survey is available in English and in French. So you can take it in both languages, and in the end, we're collating the outcomes from both versions. Both versions are essentially the same. We posted about it on LinkedIn, and you can find out more by I mean in that link. I'm going to try to put that link in the chat as well if I manage. Not having much success. I'll do it after I finish the slide deck. And also you can also use the QR code. Last but not least, if any of you might be interested in going through about a 1 hour focused interview with us, would be delighted to hear from you. So please reach out by email on LinkedIn or on our website. With that, thank you very much for your attention. If there are any questions, I am aware that I'm the one thing standing between most of you and lunch, so I'll be available if there are any questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, George. And the LinkedIn post did successfully get shared, so thank you for that. And we are ready to hand it back to Chad to close out.
Okay, I'll take us on out to close. Thank you very much, Anna. First, and where we began, encouraging you to consider adding your name to our IBWG directory, and we can paste that. That link was found in the chat. This is really helpful for facilitating connections between folks. Please do reach out if you have a topic or a presentation you'd like to share or to hear about. Please stay tuned to IBWG.ca, our new draft initial web page. Thank you very much to our 6 presenters today, Maren, Anna, Dan, Katie, Ulrich, and George. Thank you on behalf of Dan, Anna, and me for the time you provided to be here with us today. So a big thank you to taking part in the discussions, and we'll try to make time to have more exchange at these meetings. I'm glad people have availed themselves of the chat. There's lots of good intel there. If you haven't seen it, Joanna Equam, I see you've posted, and others some really good stuff. October 7th is our next scheduled meeting after the remainder of the summer. So stay safe, stay well. Thank you very much for being with us all here today. And whoa, I think we're 2 minutes early from our ultimate timing. Is there anybody who desperately has something that they want to share verbally other than the chat? If not, we're going to keep connecting because we always do. There's so much good work to be done, and that has been done. Thanks.